Okay, I think the topic speaks for itself. We're now in the 3 weeks. We know that the Derech of the Rebbe is very strong about adding Simcha wherever possible. And so I thought maybe if we're in the series of discussing the dimension of Chassidus, what Chassidus adds to everything in Yiddishkeit, I'm going to start with the topic of Simcha, and hopefully that will add to the Simcha. As I mentioned, the Rebbe says, Pi halacha, wherever it's allowed, it's not only a good idea or permissible, but it's something that should be, because that is our way of bringing Simcha into a time where there is sadness. Okay, so just to start with a perspective about how Chassidim see Simcha and how without Chassidus, there's a different look, a total different look, and sometimes it's totally misguided. So a friend of mine tells me that he's walking the street, some years ago this was, and it was Chodesh Adar, and it was when there was 2 Adars. So he meets somebody, older person that liked to ask him questions. He wasn't a Lubavitcher, and he was strong about not accepting the Lubavitch way of, or the Chassidish way of looking at things. So he says to him, this older man says to him, no, because he always liked to show him, tell him something in learning, and impress him with his ga'inus. So this time he says to him, so what do you say about Adar? So my friend as Lubavitcher says, the Rebbe says that the 60 days of Adar is batel, mevatel. It nullifies with the 60 times the amount of whatever it is that's not the positive thing. It removes it, it nullifies it. So he says to him, that's it. He says, I'll tell you a word. He tells him a word, and from this word we could see that how much simcha we have to have just for the fact that we're able to see it so differently than one would see it without chassidus. He says to him, it says in the Gemara, Mishnichnas Av Memaitim B'Simcha. When Av enters, so we have to diminish in Simcha. So what happens with the Simcha that we diminish? That means we have, I'm just explaining what he's saying. We have a level of Simcha. It's the norm. And the norm now is missing. There's a deficit. There's a Simcha deficit. So where do we make it up? Where do we fulfill? Where do we complete this deficit? When it comes to Adar, we bring it back to the norm. Now, what he's saying in effect is that for 6 months or so, a Yid, or 7 months, a Yid is walking around with a Simcha deficit that is validated and legitimized by Torah. The same Torah that says, Ivdas Hashem b'Simcha, and the same Simcha that's an integral part of being able to serve Hashem, and it goes along with everything, as we'll soon discuss. He's okay with the idea that now we're going to be running a deficit for 6-7 months or so until Adar comes. Now we don't increase the Simcha more than the norm, which is the way anyone who has any shaykhs to a Rebbe, to Chassidus, to living with and looking for the truth in Torah, would never assume that Mishnichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha means we get back to normal. It's ridiculous. Okay, so that's just the way of giving us a little bit of an idea that there's more to the idea. There's the meaning, the basic meaning of Simcha, the way we understand it, that you have to have joy. When you serve Hashem, you should feel privileged that you're lucky to serve Hashem. It's much more than that. But just to now that I mentioned Mishenichnas Adar and Mishenichnas Av, so the Gemara in Tainus says Mishenichnas Av Memaitim B'Simcha Kishem Mishenichnas Adar Marm B'Simcha Kishem Mishenichnas Av Marm B'Simcha. The Gemara in Tainus said Memaitim B'Simcha. The same is also, and this is what he told him, I believe. The Gemara says, just like when Av comes, you're Memait B'Simcha. So the same thing is also Geshenichnas Adam Marbin B'Simcha. And the question here the Rebbe asks is this the place that the Gemara chooses to use as a source why we're Marbin B'Simcha and Adar? Only because it's like something negative? Why are we bringing it as a comparison and as a basis based on Av, when the Simcha and Adar has its own merits? And it seems like it's minimizing, it's weakening the Simcha of Adar. So it's a Gemara in Tainus which talks about things that you have to fix and things that involve more of a serious kind of tone. And it's telling you only kishem, only just like. And the Rebbe explains a very deep message over here. Just like when it comes to Av, and Yimemait B'Simcha, any thinking person understands that the whole sadness of Av is only because of the great increase that will happen as a result of this Yerida, which is Yerida Tzarech Aliyah. No one looks at it as something that exists in its own right, as its own thing. Chas v'shalom, a Yid knows that Golus is something that's completely not in the question. Golus is not a natural thing. The world is not supposed to be existing with Golus. Shchinta b'Golusa, Bonim shegolim al shulchan aviyim. It's not natural. So why is there such a terrible thing? Because some things, in order to reach such a great and a high level, it comes after and it comes through a Yerida. But the Yerida is only L'Tzarech Aliyah. So when you see the Yerida, you're thinking Aliyah. And you're saying, this is an investment. This is something that's going to bring so much greater because it's so sad and it's so catastrophic. Now comes the Gemara and says, when you're coming into Adar, so your Adar shouldn't just be, as if the Rebbe is answering this person, but in other words, but the idea is very similar. Adar shouldn't be just that you're going to increase in Simcha and get back to the norm, which means that you're going to increase comparably, proportionately. No, just like this sadness is here to bring something beyond just equal to getting back to where you was, the way it was before the Yerida. The same thing is also when it comes to Adar, your Simcha has to be so much more incomparable than anything just like it was before, but now it's a little more or a lot more, but it's still comparable. That's the vort. So in these days, the Simcha has to be in such a way that we're able to understand and see that what this period is going to be bringing. As we're getting closer to Mashiach, it's even more, because it's already, in many ways, as the Rebbe says, Tammuz is a Chedesh HaGeula. Since Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, it now is seen and it's referred to as Chodesh HaGeula. Although prior to Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz, Tofresh Pei Zayin, it was more associated with sadness, with a sad month. As we know that in Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, that's when the Churban took on a whole a greater intensity. They breached the wall of Yerushalayim. But now it's a different story, because now we're turning a corner. That means even when the Churban took place, right then and there, the person's cow gored, or not gored, but groaned. And that was the moment that he tells the Tana, he tells him that the Neilad Mashiach Yisrael, that Mashiach is born, that means really we're going towards the Geula from the first moment. And it's only for that sake. But when you're closer to the time of the Churban is something that's more felt. But as we're getting closer to time of Geula, and the Rebbe says that when Yud Beis and Gimel Tammuz happened, that's not only a private Geula for the Fili Rebbe, but it's a Geula for all the Yidden, and it's connected to the Geula Mitzvah Shleima. So the anticipation is much stronger. And now we can already, like in a journey, first you're looking at where you're coming from until you get to the point of you're so close, you're focusing on getting ready to be where you're going to go to. So let's talk about a little bit about Simcha. The idea of Chassidus is, in general, Chassidus is the neshama of Torah. Chassidus is the life, the deeper dimension of Torah, which in Nigla, it would be compared to the neshama and the guf. Nigla would be the guf, the keli, the outer part, and Chassidus would be the neshama. The minute we say neshama and guf, we understand that the neshama is much more the life of the person. The neshama is much more on a higher, a more holier level. And the neshama is, of course, what deserves the most attention and the most care. So when it comes to everything in Chassidus, it's going to take everything in Yiddishkeit and not change anything, not create anything new, but it's just going to bring out the life of it, the energy, the godliness that's within it. And so that's why we have, for instance, when it comes to the Baal Shem Tov, what did the Baal Shem Tov focus on? Ava, Avas Yisrael, Avas Hashem. What is the idea of Ava? Ava is a mitzvah. But Ava could be kept on the back burner. Now, Baal Shem Tov showed us how strong and how important Ava is and how much it's necessary, as explained in Chassidus, in Tanya, that without Ava, you can't serve Hashem. How are you serving Hashem without Ava? You've got to be motivated to do what Hashem wants. And to be motivated to do what Hashem wants, you have to know what Hashem wants, and you have to appreciate it, and you have to love the commandment that Hashem gives us, and you have to love the giver of the commandment. Otherwise, there's no interest. It's not about doing something mechanically and being able to check it off on the list. That's not the way we serve Hashem. And as a matter of fact, if there's no intention whatsoever, it's a problem with the mitzvah, even though it is being fulfilled and it does count. But it's not so simple. It's not so smooth. There's a problem. Thing is that a yid does a mitzvah, so automatically, whatever motivation he has is already that he's doing it for Hashem, and there's always a hidden love. So when he's doing it, he's revealing that he still makes that the main thing about his existence. But to say that there's no motivation at all, that by mistake a person did a mitzvah, we know that when it comes to a person losing money unknowingly, it's counted, because the oni gets the money. But not in every mitzvah could you say it's counted if he has no idea that he did a mitzvah whatsoever. The chiddush is when it comes to tzedakah, because the most important thing in that case is that as a result of him, the other person received tzedakah. But to serve Hashem and not to even know you're serving Hashem, it doesn't work. So Avas Hashem is not just another thing about Yiddishkeit. It's a central thing. And not only is it a mitzvah for itself, but it belongs with every single mitzvah. It belongs with everything about the Yid of Avodas Hashem. So the Baal Shem Tov comes and shows us and brings out and makes a big deal about Avas Hashem. Another thing that the Baal Shem Tov encouraged was nigun. Singing. Singing is, again, an expression of the soul. It adds life to the Yid's serving Hashem. Until then, it was forgotten. Did the Alter Rebbe, did the Baal Shem Tov create? Did the Baal Shem Tov decide and design a new idea? No. We had Nigun in times of Beis HaMikdash, but unfortunately, in the times that Yidden went through tzaras, it got forgotten. Baal Shem Tov brought it back. And now Baruch Hashem, thanks to Baal Shem Tov and thanks to Chassidim, Nigun is a very important and popular thing in every Frume Yid's life, like never before. Unfortunately, sometimes there's too many styles, but the idea that Nigun is so prevalent today in all sects, because a lot of what the Baal Shem Tov brought seeped in, it penetrated, including when non-Chassidim go to a shliach someplace, they enjoy very much eating mezainis before davening. They're not in their regular place. They enjoy very much davening 10 o'clock. They enjoy a lot of things that Chassidim introduced, and they embrace it very nicely. It's just that where they are, they have to be careful because everyone else is watching everybody else. So coming back to another very, very important mainstay of Torah mitzvahs, which is all connected to the pnimius, to the neshama, the feeling, the life, the excitement, the energy, the desire, and that is Simcha. One of the things that Baal Shem Tov stressed very strongly is Simcha. As a matter of fact, that the Chassidim, at some point, before they took on the name Chassidim, they were called the happy ones, the Freiliche. Why would they call the Freiliche? Because a person would be given a nickname based on the way the person behaves. Some the person's tall, they call him Grois or lying. Sometimes short, call him short. If a person is dark, they call him Schwarz. If a person is lighter, they call him Weiss. After his trade, after his city, and also after his behavior. The Chassidim stood out as joyous people, full of life, full of love, full of energy, full of excitement. They were happy to be able to be Yidden, to be able to serve Hashem. And so it's all connected. We just had in Yom Yom recently that if someone would kiss, the Mezritch Maggid said that if someone would kiss Halavai, that someone would kiss the Sefer Torah like the Baal Shem Tov kissed the children, that he helped, and he was like the bus driver, take them to Cheder. These days you have to be careful, so maybe a hug. Hug is very in these days. But that also you have to be careful about. Now, so getting back to Simcha. What is so special about Simcha? What is so deep about Simcha? Not just the expression of Simcha that it shows that you're happy, and it shows that you're alive, and it shows that you care, and it shows that you're interested. But what is the inyan of Simcha? Before we talk about the inyan about Simcha, it would be appropriate to mention some things about Simcha, how much they are a part of Yiddishkeit. So the Shlomo Kaliner said that the threshold of evil is Atzvus. We know that Atzvus is the exact opposite, the opponent of Simcha. And Atzvus by Chassidim, especially in Torah, as we'll soon see, is something that's ruled out, completely ruled out. There's no room for it, there's no place for it, and it has to be completely eradicated. Why is it that way? Even though, as we see, there's another statement that the depression causes more damage than the worst Aveda. And they're related because some people say that that's what he said. Different versions of what he said. He said that Atzvus is not an Aveda and Simcha is not a mitzvah. Isn't it interesting? Simcha is not a mitzvah and Atzvus is not an Aveda. But the damage that this Atzvus could do is worse than any Aveda. And the gain that Simcha brings is greater than every mitzvah. The story that comes to mind, there's a Yid in Morocco years ago. His name was Yehuda ben Sassan. And this Yid didn't have children for 10 years. Then eventually he moved to France, and he had a business associate. And when he went to visit his business associate one time, his business associate, who was a Jew who lived in France, he lived in Morocco, and they did business. So he used to come every so often to meet with him. And when he came this one time, his business associate said, your face looks very down. Why does his face look very down? I forgot to say, because when he walked in, he says, I get a mazel tov. What's the mazel tov? My son, after many years, had a baby. His wife had a baby. And at that point, this person's face changed. And it hit him so hard because it reminded him of the fact that he's waiting for children. He doesn't have any children. And he was very broken. And the guy said, you look very upset. Oh, I should have known. Sorry. So he says to him, you know what? Maybe it's Hashgacha Pratis that you came here. Because I want to tell you that my son's wife had a baby thanks to a bracha of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This was in the time of, way back when this person, Yehuda ben Sassan, learned by Rabbi Michal Lipsker in Morocco. This takes us back, very far back. And so he says, why don't you talk to the shliach over here, the Lubavitcher person over here in France, and ask him to help you write a letter to the Rebbe. And so he did that. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. He went to the shliach, and they wrote a letter together. And lo and behold, had a bracha, and his wife had a baby girl, and then they moved to Eretz Yisrael. And when she was about 3.5 years old, she comes home. She was so excited. She loved it. She got used to the language and the friends and everything else. And one day she comes home, she has a terrible headache. And they went to doctors. First, the doctor was just the family practitioner, a pediatric. He thought it was an infection or some kind of a virus or a flu or something. He gave antibiotic. But unfortunately, it persisted until they realized, and the doctor himself said when they came back with the child, the doctor said, you got to go take some tests. And unfortunately, lo yaleinu, they found something there in the brain. So their lives came to a complete halt. Everything went dark on them. The pride, the joy of their life, the one thing they waited for. And it ended up being that they were told to come to New York, I believe, and the hospitals here were known, or this particular hospital was known to be the best place to go for this particular illness. And the doctor said, of course, whatever, it doesn't look good, it's nothing really we can do. And he's sitting there after he gets the news, and he's so broken, him and his wife, they're just crying. And the wife says to him, sounds like the story with Elisha, right? His wife says to him, why are we sitting over here and acting like we have nothing, no place to go? The Rebbe's bracha gave the child. Let's go to the Rebbe and give the Rebbe the job, the customer service, the warranty. So, anyway, he went into Yechidus. How he got in and all that, but he went into Yechidus. It was in Chodesh Adar. And he gives the zettel to the Rebbe, and he just bursts out crying. The Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe smiles. And that doesn't seem very polite for someone like the Rebbe to show indifference like that. And the Rebbe says, you want to bring sadness into my room in the month of Adar? Now he's stunned completely, like the Rebbe's even having complaints. And he's doing something wrong. So he says, Rebbe, it's my daughter's life. And the Rebbe turned very serious. And the Rebbe said, and you think that with sadness, it's going to help the situation? And the Rebbe told him the month of Adar is a month that everything turns over. And the Rebbe made with his hands. everything, you be, whatever, however the Rebbe finished, I don't want to make up words, but the idea was that the Rebbe told him to be happy, and everything's going to turn over. And needless to say, that's what happened. There's longer, more details, and she became better. As a matter of fact, he went to Kosher Bracha, Matzah Achen Shel Pesach. He came to the Rebbe's Farbrengen. He came there to stay for the last days Yom Tov, and by Kosher Bracha, first the Rebbe told him to say L'chaim by the Farbrengen, and the Rebbe called him up, and the Rebbe gave him 2 pieces of matzah. And 1 piece of matzah, the Rebbe said, this is for you to have amunah, because matzah is michle de memnusa. Matzah is a bread of faith. And this other piece is for your daughter, because matzah is also michle de asvasa, it's a bread of healing. And the Rebbe says to him these words, your daughter doesn't have to suffer because of your lack of faith. And then by Kosher Bracha also, the Rebbe repeated something like this to him. And they insisted on taking tests. A long story, and they had to go through a certain procedure. And it turned out to be there was nothing there, but she didn't come out of the procedure. They only did the procedure to be sure, which he says, he looks back and he laughs at himself. I mean, the Rebbe took away the illness and I still had to be sure and I still had to do something. The Rebbe didn't tell me it was necessary. I did it on my own. And she had a hard time coming out of it. She finally came out of it, and the speech was not there yet. It didn't come back to her. And this is when he was by the Farbrengen. And of course, with the Rebbe's matzah and the Rebbe's brachas, the next day or so, I don't want to be inaccurate here. The Rebbe, basically, she got her speech back and so on. So what do we see from here? To the extent that the Rebbe sees it as an offense. Chas v'shalom, not against the Yid, but against the... Don't bring Simcha, don't bring Atzvus in here. Because Atzvus is something that's way, way, way out of the question completely. And why is it that way? Because the Yetzer Hara is a wise guy, very skilled, and he has the latest and the best strategies. And one of his strategies is Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya and in all the different places of Chassidus, this is a very strong point that's emphasized over and over. The Yetzer Hara convinces the person to do an Aveda. But when the person does the Aveda, he's not happy yet. That wasn't his real goal. That was just extra. Till you get to the Kretschmer, that's a little bit of a drink. What he really wants is after the Aveda. After the Aveda, he's the same one that starts digging into the person. And he comes to the person and says, you're anyway nothing. You're anyway a failure. Look at you. You just did an Aveda. You can't even control yourself. What do you think? What are you thinking by now just making believe nothing happened? You're nothing. You're nobody. Don't even do anything else because you're such a waste of time. In other words, he wants that atzvus. He wants that depression. He wants that heaviness, that laziness. He wants the offer. The offer is the dirt. Offer is the earth. Offer is the lowest form of the element of what the world is comprised of. And offer represents, as the Alter Rebbe says in the first Perek in Tanya, laziness, heaviness, melancholy, depression. What does it do? It deals with the central nerve system of the person's neshama. It doesn't just get one Aveda, because then the person's going to do a mitzvah. So yeah, there's a lot of mitzvahs, as we say, as it says, that Yidden are malein mitzvahs kerimen, even Pesha Yisrael, even those that are they don't follow Torah mitzvahs, they're not considered those that follow Torah mitzvahs, they're called Rishoim. Even those people that one way or another, they have so many mitzvahs. The Yetzer Hara is looking for the big shot, the big score. He's going for the stars. He's looking to hit the person in the central system. So what does he do? He gets the person down. for the same Avera that he convinced the person to do. And he made it so enticing and he made it so hard for the person to resist. But now he comes back with the clincher. What is the clincher? He disables the person. And we all know that when we're down, we're not the same. We're not the same in how we can do things successfully and accomplish. Everything is sluggish. Everything is delayed. Everything is with such difficulty. We can't think straight because every minute our mind goes back to that, whatever it is, and it doesn't let us function. And then he's happy. Then he's happy. Because why? Because it's a snowball rolling down the mountain. When a person is finally brought down into depression, the depression itself doesn't let him out of it. It feeds off itself. And you should never know of depression. Everyone experiences a little bit of a downer here and there because we're human. And the Yidden are compared to the Levana. So lunatic comes from the word lunar. Yeah. Because when someone is not steady, it's called a lunatic. So we're all lunatics, and we're all multi-personality because we have a nefesh lekis, nefesh bahamas. We were given it all, Baruch Hashem. But we can handle it. That's why we're the ones who have this task of making sense out of everything and figuring out how to work with it and use it in the right direction. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about Simcha. The Arizal says, it says in the Pasuk, Tachas asher le'avadatas Hashem leikecha b'simcha v'tuv levav. Actually, it's in a Rambam. It's in a famous Rambam. But it's attributed to the Arizal. I'll quote the Rambam soon. I'll read to you from inside a little piece, time allowing. So the Arizal says, you know what the Pasuk means? The Arizal is bringing out, of course, the Arizal is Makubal, Pnimius HaTorah, Seidus HaTorah. Where you're going to find the emphasis and where you're going to find the stress on Simcha, no more than in Kabbalah, in Chassidus. So it's talking about the Klalos. The Klalos means the Teichacha that we read twice a year, and in Chumash Devarim, in Parshas Savoi, there's 98 Klalos over there. And one of the things that it says there in the Pasuk is, all this is happening to you because you didn't serve Hashem with joy, uvetuv levov, and with gladness of heart. Now the simple pshat, the plain pshat, without the deeper dimension, without the chassidus bringing out the life of this pasuk, is when things were good, you forgot about me. That's what the Eibusha says. You had everything you needed. Everything was going fine. You didn't have these curses. You didn't have these punishments. You didn't have all this horror and calamity and terrible things, what it says over there. And unfortunately, if you look back in history, you could see how so many of them had become true. Literally, in the time of the Holocaust and other times, Spanish Inquisition and the time of Tachatat, probably everything is in there. We shouldn't be experts in that. So, when things were good, you should have recognized, you should have been more aware of what you're getting. You should have been more appreciative. You should have realized that you owe some recognition and you owe to serve the one who's giving you all this because he's the one who created you and he's the one that's keeping you in existence and he's the one that's giving you everything you have. But then you weren't serving the Eibishter through joy. That means in the state of joy and the state of gladness of heart that you had everything you wanted and everything you could think of, including for sure everything you needed. Now you're asking for it. You're asking to be reminded who's the one who's feeding you, who's the one that's taking care of you. Unfortunately, it's like the Rashi says a mashal in Pashas Matas Maseh. They're going through the places where they went on the way there, father and child. The father has a child on his shoulders, and they were coming back on the way. They were talking about the different places they visited, and at some point, to bring out how the Yidden unfortunately got into trouble, and Rashi brings a mashal of the child that, as he's sitting on the father's shoulder, and there's someone passing by, they pass someone by, and the child says, "Did you see my father?" And the father throws him off his shoulder. Why? You're sitting on my shoulder and you're looking for me? And you're asking somebody else? I mean, you don't remember who you're sitting on? I mean, why are you so high up there? Why are you not using your feet and getting tired like I am? Because I'm carrying you also. So it's even harder. So the Eibusher says, you had everything. Now, unfortunately, you forced me to not, you didn't trigger all this because you didn't even think of me. Comes Arizal and says no. And the Rambam is saying the same thing. It literally means, and this is very extreme, because when you served Hashem, you didn't serve him with joy and happiness. With happiness and joy. You know what that means? That means that the Eibusher is saying that your Torah mitzvahs was missing the main ingredient, the life. The life of your Torah mitzvahs was absent. So, unfortunately, it didn't add up. And that's very, very strong. I think it speaks for itself. Right there, we have the foundation for where the Torah does talk very strongly about Simcha. We know that there is a pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Kuf, and we say it every day in davening. Not every day, not Shabbos and Yom Tov, not every Pesach and so on, but almost every day, many days, most days. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. But Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha could also be understood as together with your serving Hashem, one of the things you should have is Simcha. It's a component. There's many components. Simcha is part of what you should have. Comes Chassidus and says, no. Simcha is a mitzvah, true. Actually, it's not a mitzvah, but Simcha is something that's another component. Avos Hashem is a mitzvah. And Avos Yisrael. But Simcha, this Simcha doesn't mean also have it that in your repertoire. Also have it as part of the things you do. Ivdu es Hashem, everything you're doing in serving Hashem has to have that life in it, has to have that soul in it, and that's the Simcha. Because what does it feel like if someone's doing something for another person reluctantly, hesitantly, without wanting to do it? It doesn't feel like the person cares and the person wants to do it. Now, we're serving Hashem for the opposite reason. We're serving Hashem because we're trying to express that's the least we could do. We would do anything if we could do everything and anything. But we're going to do the things that you tell us to do. At least we're so privileged and we're so lucky to be able to be connected to the Eibusher. It's a whole different story. When there isn't this element of connection, when the element of connection to Hashem is not in the picture, then where's the Simcha? Imagine you're pulling a bag up a mountain only because someone told you should do it and you have no choice. He's paying you, or he's a king, or he's your master, you're the servant. How do you feel about it? I have no choice. I would love not to have to do this. But unfortunately, I got to earn a living. Unfortunately, I was sold to my master because I can't support myself. I need room and board. And this is how I earn it. This is how I end up deserving it. But do I want to do this? Is this something in itself that I have an interest in? Sure not. So Judaism, Torah, mitzvahs, Yiddishkeit becomes burdensome because it's missing the deeper energy that gives the mitzvah its whole different appreciation. Comes Chassidus and says, wait a second. As we had in today's Tanya, Tzaddikim b'misosam kruim chayim. Tzaddikim, even after their passing, they're called alive. Rishoyim b'chayeyim kruim mesim. Rishayim are called not alive, even when they are physically alive in a neshama, in a body, but that's not real life. What is real life? And what is our strongest and only true desire is to be connected to true life. There's nothing more that the neshama wants is to be a little bit more connected to its source, because without its source, it's nothing. You don't believe me? Take a look at your teenager when his phone is dead. He's gonna have one thing in mind: where could I get a charger plugged in? Nothing else matters. Because what am I worth if I'm a piece of clay? What am I worth if I could live without having to have the Eibush to make me live every second? Then what am I? And what is my life all about anyway? The Alter Rebbe says you have to be Mare de Chushbana. You have to be those that do accounting. What kind of accounting do you do? How do you break the clipper? We're learning about tshuva, the hey tata. How you bring up the lower hey, which is malchus, which is the shechina, which is the person's neshama. That's like the shliach that goes into the craziest places that are so not Jewish and so tumedik and everything else. The Alter Rebbe didn't want to send people, didn't want Napoleon to win, because the place was a clipper hotbed. France. It's a big chiddush that shluchim went to France. The first shluchim with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's in Tafresh Sadi Gimel. The Rebbe himself says it in the Sikha. So, unfortunately, the Eibusha says, Malchus, Levana, get smaller. What does smaller mean? Get further away from me. Go down lower. I need you to go to that place that my presence will not be able to be there, because I'm hidden. And you're the little bit of light that remains after everything else was blocked out, to give it its energy, to give it its chayas. So you need godliness everywhere, because otherwise it won't exist. But then the neshama comes down into this body, and this body is a big challenge in itself, because it has tendencies that are opposite of what the neshama is all about, because it's in this world and it understands and it relates to all these precious, good, delicious, fun things. So the person Nebuch does an Aveda. What happens when he does an Aveda? His neshama has to go with him. His neshama is like, in Rivka's stomach, Yaakov and Esav. Each one was trying to pull the other guy because they were stuck together. Now the neshama, which is the Shechina, which is the part of Hashem that comes down, all the way down into the lowest things, ends up in Klippa's hands, because an Aveda is Klippa. Someone does an Aveda, and now it's not just around things that are physical, and they don't reveal godliness, they cover godliness, but now there's things that fight Hashem. But he's in their property, he's in there. They got him, they caught a fish. He's locked up in jail. So you got to bust out, says the Alter Rebbe. How do you bust out? So one method, says Alter Rebbe in today's Tanya, is just beat the guards up. Just destroy them. Attack them. Destroy them. How do you attack the guards? Well, the guf, its energy, comes from kashmirs, from food, from drink. Fast. David HaMelech fasted. And he destroyed his Yetzer Hara. He killed it with tainus, tanesim. Hargay b'tainus. Libi cholol b'kirbi, he says. My heart is void. I don't have it, Baruch Hashem. And the Gemara says, ki hargay b'tainus. I say that sometimes students could kill a teacher with tainus, with complaints, but that's a different story. So, Chas v'shalom, not kill, but ruin his day, kill his day. Unless you're conditioned for it already. Now, comes Alter Rebbe, says another way to bust this guy out, to bust the Nefesh Shalikis, the Shechina that's stuck in the Klippa. And that is to be Memorei de Chushbana. Look at it a little bit deeper. Look at it a little more carefully. Identify its true existence. Identify its true definition. What is this? What is this whole Tumah, Klippe, Gashmias? What is this whole thing anyway? And when you reach a recognition that it's nothing, that you're pursuing death, you're pursuing something that doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't continue your existence. You're pursuing something that in itself is dead. Now, when you come to realize that, you're exposing the opposition, and the opposition is forced to see it that way too, because it's on paper. Where are you going? Where are you headed? What are you going to have from all this? If someone has an addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, smoking, and the person realizes, someone opens the person's eyes. It's not so easy, but the idea is that, are you taking this, or is it forcing you to have it? Are you being controlled by it, or is it controlling you? If you look back, says the Alter Rebbe, make a cheshbon. What did you gain from all the stupid things? What did you gain from all this besides being unhealthy, being overweight, being tired, not being able to function because you go to a party and you drink and you can't function like a human being, and then you mess up with your job, and then you mess up with your family because you're not bringing in a living, so you're not functioning as a breadwinner, and then you mess up this way, you mess up that way, and you can't even think straight because your whole life is upside down because all you're doing is stuffing yourself because you need more and more, and you're not even able to control it. Once you realize the true good, the true life, and the true evil, and the true death, it's much easier. It's much easier to be able to function according to that. So when we talk about Simcha, what are we talking about when we say Simcha? We're talking about the fact that Chassidus, and only Chassidus could claim this, and only Chassidus could teach this, because Chassidus is what teaches that the Eibishter is recreating the world every moment. Literally. How is a creation that is being recreated every moment? And in order to understand that the Eibishter is creating every moment, we have to go back to the other concept of Chassidus that comes before it. And that's Yesh Me'ayin. Why is it Yesh Me'ayin? Because where is this Yesh coming from? How could there be something coming finite that comes from infinite? It's impossible. It's all on paper. That's the greatness of Chassidus, that it could show it to you, like, work it out right here. So the Eibishter is Ein Sof, and the Eibishter is creating worlds and creations, and they all have a measurement. Even the higher worlds, which aren't physical, they all have some kind of a description, some kind of an outline, some kind of a definition, which means it's not Ein Sof. So now, if the Eibishter is going to create anything outside of itself whatsoever, it's going to be completely distant from the Eibishter in such a way that it can't exist. So how is that going to happen? The answer is, it doesn't have a source. It doesn't have a root. Because if you could trace it back, then it's not all the way to the source, because the source is infinite. You can't trace back infinity to infinity. You can't do it. So the person now is Mare de Chushbana. He learns a little Chassidus. And when he learns a little Chassidus, he says, Oy vey, the Eibishter is thinking about me this very minute, and the next minute, and the minute before. And he keeps on giving me life, and he keeps on giving me existence. What's your reaction to that? I want to be connected to this source of life. I don't want to be distant from it, even a drop. I want to be as close as I can. As a matter of fact, I want to be part of it. But I can't, because I'm in a physical body. And that doesn't allow me to become included and one in such a way that I'm part of the Eibishter, and all you see is Hashem. You don't even see. It's like the small candle, the small flame in the big, huge flame. but at least something, please. And David says, you know what? I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to give you certain things that is for you to have a connection to me. And that way, you'll be able to have me in the highest way, because I'll be in there. My DNA is going to be in there. Now the Yid says, oh, wow, you mean these mitzvahs is the Eivishter creating and giving and coming up with only so I should be connected to him? Who's doing who the favor now? Who feels privileged? Who feels lucky? Who feels fortunate? Who can't get enough of it? What do you think? What do you see? That by Chassidim there was always Hidur Mitzvah. Why Hidur Mitzvah? It's not enough what we have already. We have so many mitzvahs, you know. And the Gemara says it's enough what you were told, what you were given to do. Why would you take upon yourself more things when it comes to the Nazir? He has to bring a korban. What Aveda did the Nazir do? Taylor says you're allowed to drink wine, and he decided he's not going to drink wine. So he gets it's a punishment, right? How do you look at this? How do you look at it? You look at it that you're doing extra? Or you're looking at it as the least I can do. And if there's more, I'll take it. And I'll grab it. And I'll do anything to take it. Even if it means losing sleep and losing money. Even if it means being worn out. What do you think that Bachrim that go to Brighton Beach or to Upper East Side, West Side, Simcha, they come back 2 o'clock in the morning. What did they do? They walked 3.5 hours each way. I think it's total 7, right? And they did hakafas, which means they danced around over there for the few hours they were there. And then they come back and they go straight to 770, and they feel so privileged and so lucky that now they could do hakafas in 770. And they run around with this day for day, jumping and singing and who knows what. Like they're the luckiest people in the world. They did hakafas already. No one's going to punish them for not doing hakafas in 770 because they did hakafas in Talucha, and the walking definitely makes up for the lack of doing it in 770. The Rebbe already finished hakafas way before that. And you go over to the guy and you say, this is not necessary. You already yaitza everything. You could actually wake up late tomorrow and come after hakafas. You don't have to do hakafas for the next 10 years. I mean, what? 7 hours and jumping around for another 2 hours. But why is it that way? Because I'm lucky. I have an opportunity. So now that's where the simcha comes in. The feeling privileged, the feeling so lucky that I not only could wear my tzitzis by day, I could wear my tzitzis by night also. And I not only could put on Rashis, I could put on at times also. I not only could have a small beard film, I could have a huge beard film. And so on and so on and so on. Why? Because I know what I'm getting. Because the sack that I'm pulling up the mountain is not dirt. And it's not for the master. And it's not for the king. It's for me to be able to take home. So the joy, so one guy's crying. And he's completely devastated. I have to pull this sack up the mountain. He never bothered to be modern the chushbana. He never bothered to check what's inside the sack. He was so busy thinking about the externals. How hard it is. How tired he is, how much it's not his choice, and so he's doing it only because someone else told him. Meanwhile, he doesn't even know how much he himself wants it, more than the person that told him to do it. Much, much more. And so Chassidus says, take a look. You want to be motivated to do mitzvahs for the right reason? Not to just check it off the list because you're afraid of Gehenna, of some kind of a monster with fiery eyes, and he's going to grab you. Hurrah! And he's going to put you in fire, and then he's going to put you in ice, and then he's going to... And is that your Yiddishkeit? What kind of Eibishter do you have? Well, the Eibishter is some kind of a monster himself. So what's the answer? The answer is, Simcha means that Chas v'Shalom, you don't believe in Hashem. In short. Why? Because the person who doesn't recognize that there's an Eibishter, and what does an Eibishter mean? And what does a Yid have to believe in the Eibishter? That there's nothing else besides Hashem. We believe in Achdus Hashem. And if there's nothing else besides Hashem, then Hashem, that's the first four prakim in Rambam, Hashem creates everything. There's nothing that creates Hashem, and Hashem creates everything. So by extension, that means that Hashem is creating me now. If I don't feel lucky and fortunate, and this is the best thing that ever happened to me, to be able to do a mitzvah, it means I don't even consciously believe that there's an Eibishter. The Eibishter that created everything and nothing created him. And that's where the Yesh Me'ayin comes from. And that's why I'm so lucky. And therefore, it's not about doing it. It's about feeling it. Doing it is what counts, but feeling is it is what makes it real. Of course, you have to do it because the practice is what the Eibishter wants. The technical aspect is what the Eibishter wants. But if someone's doing it, Nebuch, he's afraid of not getting a reward, or he's afraid of a punishment, then his whole Yiddishkeit is missing the Iker, it's missing the Neshama. And so that's why we have to have the dimension of Chassidus, the inner dimension of Simcha, because that is what drives the whole Yiddishkeit of a person. And that's what makes the person excited, motivated, full of joy. And that's what the Eibishter wants. The Eibishter should help us that when it comes to the 3 weeks, and we bring Simcha in wherever we can, what are we saying? We're saying to the Eibishter, we know you're good. And we know that whatever happened in these 3 weeks, we know that it's for the good. And the whole idea of anything negative that's happening is still greeted and embraced with a positiveness. Because I know that no bad can come from Hashem. And that's another inyan of Chassidus that again shows us that the neshama of Yiddishkeit, everything that's connected to a person's reaction to being in this world and to being a Yid and to serving Hashem, has the right approach, the right attitude. So we should have the real good and the true good, which we already paid the price for, according to the Rebbe, and according to many others. Take of miyad mamash. Amen.